certainly our joint interagency and coalition teammates value and will continue to rely on the distinctive capabilities that airmen provide every day. It is difficult not to be proud of our courageous airmen, humble, everyday men and women who perform remarkable deeds and achieve extraordinary results. Tech Sergeant Ted Hoffneck is one such airman. As a Joint Terminal Attack Controller attached to a Special Operations team in Afghanistan, with 20 U.S., Afghan, and coalition teammates, they were on a mission when they encountered a numerically superior 70-person Taliban force. And during the engagement, Sergeant Hoffneck turned the tide of the fight by leveraging combat air power with 8 fixed and rotary wing assets with deadly precision. An hour into the battle, the enemy launched a violent ambush, blasting away with improvised explosive devices, heavy machine gun fire, and barrages of rocket-propelled grenades that separated his team. Despite the extreme hazard, Sergeant Hoffneck organized a small team of Afghan fighters to recover his isolated teammates. And while engaging the enemy with personal firearms, he and his team evacuated the team members who were separated, even carrying one injured Afghan partner on their shoulders to a helicopter landing zone approximately 2 kilometers away. That is 1 click on foot, and then the final on a cargo vehicle. And all the while, he administered life-saving aid to the critically wounded survivors and coordinated the final actions for evacuation. Sergeant Hoffneck, this nation is fortunate to have you in her service, exemplifying commitment to duty, displaying valor under fire, and favoring humility over glory. Nonetheless, I ask that you please stand in front of your peers for well-deserved recognition. Sergeant Hoffneck and many, many others who quietly perform the missions such as those like his which are chronicled in this year's installment of Portraits in Courage inspire us to believe in the broader consequence of individual successes. I urge you to pick up a copy of this year's volume of Portraits in Courage that are being distributed certainly here at this convention, and see for yourself. This notion of selflessness and sacrifice, the likes of which are exhibited every day by airmen like Sergeant Hoffneck and so many others, is the bedrock, ladies and gentlemen, of our all-volunteer force, which is exactly why we must keep faith, as Secretary Donnelly has said, with those who volunteer to serve. Such selflessness during a time of sustained operations all around the world is what makes me smile, makes me shout out that our Air Force gives no quarter to any other Air Force on the planet or member of our joint team. But the relentless escalation in personnel costs, approximately 65% since 1985, even though active duty end strength has fallen by 45% in the same period, simply is not sustainable to maintain this unrivaled all-volunteer force. As we address this trend, we will be very deliberate, very carefully considering the profound implications of potential adjustments in compensation and benefits on recruiting and retention. An important dimension of rising personnel expenses is healthcare, which is projected to consume over 10% of the DoD base budget by the year 2015. Here again, adjustments almost certainly must be made, but in a way that keeps faith with our airmen and families, active, reserve, and retired. While being prudent, we must also keep in mind that adjustments have the potential, no matter how difficult the choices, to put our successors in a better place. The proposals that were advanced by the Defense Business Board earlier this year are not entirely without merit. However, I do have reservations to the extent that the study presented a commercial view of what it is we do without due consideration to recruiting, retention, and readiness. The recommendations are clearly incomplete and thus lack credibility. So, for example, although we realize that a purely vested retirement is almost certainly not sustainable in the longer term, the idea of a retained asset still requires more analysis that carefully takes into account the overall health of our force. Indeed, the idea of something contributory and more portable, which a member who separates before retirement may take with him or her, is not unattractive and perhaps deserves consideration. But we should proceed with such proposals only after thoroughly evaluating the potential effects on recruiting and retention, readiness, and ultimately, our overall effectiveness. There is no denying that we continue to face ambiguity in the future security environment. Economic and political interdependence continues to increase. State powers and centers of influence continue to emerge and rise. We must be ever more prepared to respond across the entire spectrum, a range of operating environments, from the higher end against near-peer competitors toward lower end against insurgents and terrorist elements. Yet as we prepare to respond across the entire spectrum and to meet numerous and varied contingencies, we must be ever more disciplined in our spending decisions, because based on the current fiscal state of play, we can expect that budgetary pressures will continue to intensify and purchasing power continue to decline. But we know that air power, with its inherent and unparalleled flexibility, adaptability, and the ability to range vast distances with unequaled speed, will continue to play an influential role in the evolving and uncertain geostrategic environment. And by translating air power's intrinsic characteristics into timely and tailored and precise effects, both kinetic and non-kinetic, virtually anywhere on the globe, airmen are not only able to make distinctive operational contributions, they are also present and to present an expanded menu of strategic options to our national leadership. To ensure that these air power effects for the future, Secretary Donnelly and I are intensely focused on managing potential budget constraints in a way that reflects our priorities and avoids creating a future force that merely appears on paper to be effective, but in reality is reduced substantially in depth and breadth. Amidst the uncertainty surrounding ongoing budget talks to bring our nation's deficit and debt under control, we know one thing for certain: the budget will tip over, as it has for other sectors of the government. And so when the budget reductions occur, we will have to make the extremely difficult choices to restructure and posture the force deliberately, not to attempt merely to scale down or to accept a scaled-down version of business as usual. Attempts to evenly distribute reductions and reallocations do not assure a robust and capable force. Rather, we must be vigilant in building a force corresponding to operational risk, capability and capacity requirements, personnel and material needs, and prudent strategies for investment in modernization, recapitalization, and readiness. In this way, we can better be prepared to continue providing our unique capabilities and afford a wider range of options and flexible efforts for power projection. Unique because our core contributions come with maximum speed, maximum precision, minimum vulnerability, and a global perspective of air and space presence of which our nation's civil, military, and commercial aviation activities rely.